Well, it's my great pleasure to welcome to Kyiv Post the Director General of the International Commission for Missing Persons, Kathryne Bomberger, based in The Hague. Kathryne, welcome. In 2 words, please tell our audience what your commission does.
Okay. The International Commission on Missing Persons is a treaty-based intergovernmental organization that works to secure the cooperation of governments and others to locate missing persons and investigate their disappearance, whether they're missing from war, human rights abuses, organized crime, migration, or any other set of circumstances where persons are missing for involuntary reasons.
And when was this commission set up?
It was set up in 1996, at that point at the behest of President Clinton at a G7 summit to deal originally with the conflicts in the former Yugoslavia.
And okay, you've partly answered my question. Where have you been most active before being involved in Ukraine?
Yeah, so before Ukraine, we've done a lot of work in the former Yugoslavia, which is they found more missing people than any other region in the world. So that is a very good model for Ukraine.
Can you give us an idea of
Sure.
the scale?
Yeah, so 40,000 people went missing as a consequence of the conflicts that took place starting in 1991. And of that number today, over 75% have been accounted for, and almost 90% of those missing from the Srebrenica genocide. So that's unprecedented. We currently have work in Syria, Iraq, Libya, Armenia, Azerbaijan, the issue of missing migrants, particularly in Europe, because of the 50,000 migrants missing around the world, over 50% are missing in Europe. We also work in Canada at the behest of the Canadian government and First Nations to deal with the residential school issue where there are missing persons, missing children. For example, we're working in Vietnam. We just started a project there, very much tied to the recent visit of President Biden to Hanoi, a War Legacies project to deal with the high number of Vietnamese that went missing after the United States found most of the missing POWs, etc. So this is a very important job, but we work with governments to ensure that they have the long-term capacity to find the missing.
Kathryne, this is a huge, daunting task. How do you go about it? I mean, are you on the ground, or is this through diplomacy, through working with ministries? Give us an idea of what the work involves.
At all levels, what you just described. We're on the ground, but the key is to help the state build its capacity to do this work. So in the context of Ukraine, if I may, there are today probably at a minimum 30,000 people who are already missing. So the numbers are already astronomical. They're huge. And that also includes the numbers of missing from 2014. I first came to Ukraine in 2014 following the discovery of mass graves in Slavyansk. So there may be 600 individuals already that were missing before 2020, before the invasion. And today the numbers are a minimum of 30,000 and they continue to grow every single day. So having such a huge number of missing persons requires that Ukraine scale up its capabilities, meaning it has relevant laws, a criminal procedure code, that it finds a way to build the institutional infrastructure, legislation that will support securing the rights, and using advanced technologies to identify missing persons in line with the rule of law.
So, I mean, it's not just missing persons that perhaps have been abducted or imprisoned, deported. We're talking about corpses, bodies, people killed, identifying them from the remains and from the DNA.
That's correct, Bogdan. I mean, every single category of missing person. So in other words, until you've completed the investigation, you don't actually know what the circumstances are. So it can include all of the categories that you just mentioned: people in incommunicado detention, children that were deported, mortal remains that are unidentified. I've talked to many families already, for example, that know they have their fathers somewhere in Mariupol. They know that they're dead, but they've not received the body. So they're technically still missing, for example.
I'll just remind our viewers that I'm talking to the Director General of the International Commission on Missing Persons, Kathryne Bomberger. Kathryne, how many people do you have here? Do you have a team in place, or you do just visit?
Yeah, we have a team in place since over a year, but we still need to have a host state agreement so that we can now really have a really good partnership with Ukraine to help them undertake this huge endeavor to find missing persons. We currently have about 20 staff. They include forensic anthropologists, archaeologists. They include individuals that do data collection, because we have a data system that we are donating to Ukraine. It's in Ukrainian. We use it every day. Many governments have adopted this system. It's very important because it's a workflow for missing persons. We have DNA specialists also that are working with the Ukrainian laboratories here to ensure a DNA-led process of identifications. We have teams that work with families of the missing in civil society. Ukraine has a very strong civil society structure and, of course, a very open media. These are all great, so civil society as a whole needs to be completely engaged, and the process has to be one that is open and transparent.
Are you satisfied with the level of cooperation with Ukrainian authorities and civil society?
Yeah, really, the fact that we've signed 2 agreements yesterday, one with the Minister of Justice, the other with the Minister of Health, and we've had meetings, with the Minister of Interior. We are, yes,
this
very
is on
satisfied.
October the 18th.
Yeah.
Okay. How does your approach differ from the very secretive approach of, say, the Red Cross?
Yeah. So the Red Cross operates in line with the Geneva Conventions, in line with international humanitarian law, and that's extremely important. So Ukraine is doing 2 things at the same time, which is unprecedented, by the way. I've never seen this. They're fighting a war, on the one hand, where IHL, or international humanitarian law, is important, where warring parties should share information on missing persons cases, where persons should be protected from disappearing, which is failing, obviously, where the dead are treated with dignity, and that's extremely important. But at the same time, it's conducting an active investigation into missing persons cases. Now, this has never happened before. Usually, countries conduct these investigations when the war has ended. So Ukraine is doing something unprecedented. So we're in new territory here. So we are working with Ukrainian institutions, state institutions that are responsible now for conducting investigations. And the challenge is, as I said earlier, scaling it up so that Ukraine can conduct investigations into tens of thousands of missing persons cases and related atrocities, war crimes, other atrocities that are related to missing persons. So ICRC is conducting its work in line with its mandate, which is necessary while there's an ongoing armed conflict. It's like a relay, but we're doing our work to help the state institutions build its capacity to do large-scale investigations.
Do you have sufficient support from donors, from supporters who understand the scale of the problem?
We do, and we're very grateful to our donors that currently include the EU, the United States, Germany, Canada, and hopefully Norway will also join that group, and we encourage other states to do so. In fact, later today I'm meeting with the diplomatic community to give an assessment and to also give an outline of what the strategy could look like for Ukraine.
Any suggestions as to how your work and Ukraine's work could be improved? What is missing?
Yeah, so I think these are the things that are missing. While things are proceeding in a very positive way, I would say, there are gaps. Okay, that include number one, there are multiple institutions, as is always the case, that are conducting investigations. So the SBU, the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Defense, etc., the Office of the Prosecutor. So they need to harmonize their work. They need to work together. And normally what we recommend for governments is that they create some kind of standalone structure, a Missing Persons Institute or commission that coordinates the work of all these bodies. So that's number one. They really need to do, and they know this. Now the issue is housed within the Ministry of Interior, so they should take the lead in constructing such a body. Secondly, that body must include, it must be formal in construct and include a space for families of the missing and civil society organizations, so it's operating in full transparency. Third, there needs to be a unified data system capability, because if each institution is conducting its own investigation, all that data has to go into one place. This is classic police work, but on a hyper scale. So that means that the proper chain of custody has to be stored electronically so that it's accessible, trackable, and so that that data can eventually be used for criminal trial purposes, because Ukraine is fighting a war, a physical war, but it's also fighting a war of misinformation. So facts are essential, and preserving those facts, analyzing those facts, and having them readily available is critical. Finally, there needs to be what we call a DNA-led process. This worked in the Western Balkans, and why we were able to help identify such a large number of persons missing from the Srebrenica genocide. and we're traumatized by that experience. So we really want to ensure that Ukraine uses models that work. So DNA needs to be used as the first line of identification so that science is used. So there's irrefutable evidence that can be provided for criminal trial purposes. Once you have scientific proof of identity, you can link that identity back to the crime scene and to cause and manner of death. And then you have powerful evidence.
Thank you. Well, that's a very concise and comprehensive overview. One final question, I guess. Can you make any generalizations as to the composition of the caseload? I'm sorry to use such euphemistic language.
Yeah.
Women, children, men.
Yeah.
Are these ordinary civilians? Are these people who have been politically active and have been punished for that?
Yeah.
Who are we talking about?
Yeah, well, there are obviously both civilians and military, servicemen who are missing. But given the demographics, and this is not unusual, the majority are men, for sure, which means the majority of those left behind are women and children whose rights to justice, truth, and reparations must be secured. Beyond that, we don't have the full details, but I think once Ukraine has established its own data system capability, this demographic information can be more easily analyzed and will be essential, again, for an honest reckoning of what's happening. Now, one more important point, because Ukraine is fighting a war and conducting investigations at the same time, and we are in uncharted territory, this means that a certain amount of information, especially regarding combatants, which are held as secret as the nuclear codes, will be unknown and remain confidential. So that is something that has to be worked out. But we advise doing a population-based approach where Ukraine collects data, and this is very democratic, from all families of the missing, including missing soldiers. There are ways to share this data through numerical values, so this information can be kept confidential. But these are things that we're discussing with the Ukrainian authorities so that they think about these things. It is challenging, but there are ways to do this.
Well, thank you very much for this very detailed and yet concise insight into the very valuable work that you and your teams do. I've been speaking to the Director General of the International Commission for Missing Persons, Kathryne Bomberger. Thank you so much for finding the time to visit Kyiv Post.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for all the good work that you're doing at the Kyiv Post.
Thank you.